Welcome to Break the Loop. This is the place where shadows transform into personal power. Here we break the loop, shift timelines, and step into the highest version of ourselves. And today we're going deeper. In the first video, we explored why life repeats itself in familiar emotional patterns, but today we're going to uncover what a loop actually is, the hidden architecture behind the behaviors, reactions, and emotional cycles you keep reliving. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the anatomy of a loop, how it forms, why your mind repeats it, and why loops are directly tied to your shadow, your identity, and your timeline. This is the foundation of all transformation. This is episode 2 of our 15-part Shadow to Power series. Before we dive into the mechanics, let's begin with this truth. You cannot transform what you cannot see. Most people try to change their life by changing their habits, but habits are surface-level expressions of much deeper emotional patterns. You can try to stop reacting, stop choosing unavailable people, stop people-pleasing, stop avoiding conflict. But if you don't understand the loop behind these behaviors, you're just trimming the leaves of a tree whose roots remain untouched. Understanding loops is like finally seeing the blueprint of your emotional reality. Once you see how the pattern is built, you gain the power to rebuild it. This is why understanding loops isn't optional. It's essential. It's the beginning of true self-mastery. A loop is not just a repeated behavior. A loop is a layered system, emotional, neurological, behavioral, and identity-based, all working together beneath the surface of your awareness. At its core, a loop is an emotional memory stored inside your nervous system. It contains the feeling of a past experience, the belief that formed around it, the behavior you learned to survive it, and the identity that grew out of it. When a similar situation appears in your life, your system doesn't respond to the situation. It responds to the memory. The loop activates, and you behave as if the past is still happening now. It is the convergence of your shadow, your nervous system, your identity, and your unprocessed emotional history. This is why breaking loops isn't simple self-discipline. It's identity alchemy. Loops originate from 3 main places: childhood imprinting, emotional overload moments, and repeated environment patterns. Childhood is the first source. Your nervous system was shaped before you had language, logic, or emotional regulation skills. If love felt inconsistent, you learned to soothe, chase, shut down, or disappear. If conflict felt dangerous, you learned to avoid or appease. If you weren't seen, you learned to perform, overachieve, or shrink. These strategies become loops. Emotional overload moments also create loops, those times when something hit your system too intensely for you to process. The final source is environment. The patterns you saw modeled by parents, family, culture, or relationships. Your system internalizes these as how life works, and the loops repeat unconsciously. Loops always begin as protection. They become problems only when they continue long after the danger has passed. Now let's break down the actual cycle. Every loop follows the same pattern. It begins with a trigger, an emotional doorway that reminds your body of the past. This immediately activates an emotional echo, a familiar feeling that floods your system. That echo then generates an autopilot response, the behavior you learned years ago to manage that emotion. When you react from that autopilot place, the loop gets reinforced because the behavior confirms the belief and strengthens the identity connected to it. Over time, this becomes an identity freeze. This is who I am. This is how I react. This is how my life is. That identity freeze cements the pattern into your timeline, and the cycle starts again. This is what looping actually is: a closed circuit of emotion, behavior, belief, and identity held together by unconscious memory. People often say, "I know what I'm doing is unhealthy, but I keep doing it." That's because conscious logic does not control the loop. The shadow does. And your shadow chooses familiarity over evolution, always, even if the familiarity is painful, uncomfortable, or limiting. Your shadow learned, "When I feel this, I do this." And because this behavior once kept you safe, the shadow repeats it as if it's still required. This is why you can logically know better, want better, and choose differently, yet still fall into old reactions. The shadow operates from old emotional data. Until that data is updated, Your system will continue to loop, no matter how much conscious effort you apply. Your shadow is the storehouse of unprocessed emotional truth. It contains the parts of you that were not allowed to be expressed, understood, or integrated. These parts hold the emotional memories that formed your loops. The shadow is the one who learned to please, fight, freeze, hide, chase, avoid, numb, or perform. It is the one who carries the emotional wounds that created the loop responses. And here's the alchemical truth. The shadow also holds the key to breaking the loop. Because the moment the shadow is seen, acknowledged, and brought into awareness, its power dissolves. This is why shadow work is essential for loop breaking. You cannot break a loop from the surface. You break it at the level of shadow awareness. Your nervous system is the physical engine behind the loop. A loop is essentially a familiar state your body returns to because it knows how to survive it. If you grew up in chaos, chaos feels normal. If you grew up in emotional distance, distance feels safe. If you grew up not being heard, shutting down feels logical. Your nervous system is not addicted to pain. It's addicted to what it knows how to predict. Hypervigilance, anxiety, overthinking, people-pleasing, avoidance, numbness, over-attachment. These are not flaws. They are nervous system loops. And healing them begins not with forcing a new behavior, but with recognizing the emotional state driving it. Your body must learn a new baseline. That is part of breaking the loop. Identity is the silent architect of your loops. Once a loop repeats enough times, it becomes a story you unconsciously tell yourself. This is just how I am. I don't know how to change. I always end up in this situation. Maybe this is my destiny. These identity statements are not facts. They are loop outcomes. Your identity becomes shaped by the emotional patterns you've lived, not by the truth of who you really are. Your shadow shapes your identity when your conscious self is absent. Breaking the loop means breaking the identity that formed inside the loop. You cannot step into a new timeline while holding the identity of an older version of you. Identity shift is timeline shift. Loops and timelines are directly linked. Every loop anchors you into a timeline, the version of reality that matches the emotional state you're in. When you're trapped in a lower loop, you remain in a lower timeline. When you break a loop, you rise into a new timeline. This isn't metaphysical abstraction, it's emotional physics. Who you are being determines the reality you experience. When you stop reacting from the past and start choosing from your higher self, you shift timelines. This is why breaking loops feels like waking up in a different life. It is a different life, because you are different. Recognizing your loop is the first step to breaking it. There are 3 main signs. 1. Emotional déjà vu, a feeling that is strangely familiar even if the situation is new. 2. Behavioral repetition, doing something you promised yourself you wouldn't do again. 3. Identity echo, saying or thinking something that comes from an old version of you. Another is the emotional signature of your loop. Every loop has a specific emotional flavor: anxiety, guilt, fear of abandonment, anger, numbness, shame, over-responsibility, fear of conflict, or self-doubt. When you recognize these signatures, you spot your loop, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Awareness is the beginning of liberation. This is where everything connects. Your loop is not a prison, it is a map, a guide, a teacher. It reveals the exact part of you that is ready to evolve. When you stop fighting the loop and start understanding it, the loop becomes your portal to transformation. The shadow becomes your power. The behavior you once hated becomes the doorway to your awakening. The emotional repetition becomes the path to your identity rise. The moment you shift from judgment to awareness, you alchemize the loop. You take your power back, you step into the version of you that no longer reacts from the past, but responds from consciousness. This is how you rise. Awareness changes everything. This concludes episode 2 of our 15-part transformation series. You now understand what a loop truly is: an emotional memory held by the shadow, repeated by the nervous system, reinforced by identity, and tied to your timeline. In the next episode, we go deeper into the shadow itself, what the shadow is, how it forms, and how to work with it in a way that transforms your life from the inside out. Until then, break the loop, shift the timeline, and become your higher self.